They say family is everything, but if you've made it past 60, you probably know. That phrase doesn't always hold up. You see, love doesn't always come from the people you share a last name with. And pain? Oh, it often comes right from them. Maybe you raised them, forgave them, showed up every time they called. But when you needed support, really needed it, they were too busy, too cold, or too silent. What if I told you there are things stronger than family? Not just ideas, not just feel-good quotes. I mean real things that give more meaning, more peace, and more love than some relatives ever did. Stick around, because this might change how you see everything. Let me ask you something. How many times have you stood by your family, only for them to turn away the second it wasn't convenient? Let's be real here. Loyalty is often confused with DNA, but blood doesn't mean someone won't lie to you, or guilt you, or disappear when you're at your weakest. I learned this the hard way. I once helped my niece, my sister's daughter, get through her divorce, paid part of her rent, watched her kids, cried with her, prayed with her, and when I ended up in the hospital with a fractured hip, she didn't even call, didn't even text. 2 weeks later, she posted vacation photos in Maui. Guess who paid for those plane tickets? Her new boyfriend's parents. And you know what? That moment didn't just hurt. It woke me up. Because loyalty, real loyalty, isn't automatic. It's earned. I started paying attention after that, looking at the people who checked in on me, not just during crises, but during the ordinary quiet days. You know who called every Sunday? My neighbor Marcy. She's 64, never married, no kids, but she brings me soup when the weather drops and she knows my knees act up. She asks about my doctor's appointments. She tells me when there's a coupon at the grocery store I like. She remembers the name of my dog that passed away 4 years ago. Marcy's not family, but her loyalty? It runs deeper than a lot of people I've shared blood with. So I started redefining my circle. Instead of chasing after people who made me feel like a burden, I started pouring into the ones who showed me loyalty, without obligation. You want to know something wild? Since I turned 60, I've lost a few relatives, but I've gained something better. Solid people. Not perfect people. Not flashy people, but folks who don't vanish when life gets messy. If you're over 60, maybe you felt it too. That sting when you realize your calls only get returned when they need something. That moment at a family gathering when no one asks you about your health, your life, your heart. That guilt you feel when you start to pull away, even though you know you've been holding it all together for decades. Let me tell you something loud and clear. Loyalty matters more than lineage. Because someone who chooses to stand beside you, especially when they have no obligation to, that person's worth more than 10 relatives who treat you like you're only as valuable as what you give. Loyalty means they listen when you speak. They check in without a reason. They show up without being begged. And yes, sometimes loyalty comes from a daughter or a grandson or a cousin. But other times, it comes from a former coworker or a man from church who always saves you a seat, or the barista at this cafe who remembers how you like your tea and notices when you've stopped showing up. So here's your permission slip. Stop giving your energy to people just because they're family. Start giving it to the ones who show up for you. Let loyalty define your tribe, not your family tree. And if you feel guilty for choosing peace over tradition, remember this. The people who love you right will never make you feel wrong for walking away from those who don't. Let me say something that might sound harsh. You don't owe anyone unlimited access to you, not even your family. After 60, I finally understood that setting boundaries isn't being cold. It's being clear. For decades, I bent over backward for people with my blood. I took midnight calls. I loaned money I never saw again. I hosted Thanksgiving while limping from joint pain and still got complaints the turkey was dry. And I thought, well, that's just what you do for family. But you know what I learned? Every time you erase your own line, they step further across it. I'll tell you a story. My younger brother, Chuck, is a textbook manipulator. He always had some big idea, some emergency, and it always ended the same. Can you spot me just this once? At first, I helped. He was family. I told myself he'd do the same for me. Spoiler, he wouldn't. He didn't. He never did. Years went by. He borrowed over $9,000, never paid back a cent, didn't even call me when my husband passed. But you know when he did call? When he saw on Facebook that I'd sold my RV and suddenly had extra cash. That was the last straw. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply said, Chuck, I love you, but this is the last time we'll have this conversation. My door is closed to anything involving money, drama, or guilt. And I meant it. Setting that boundary, it felt like I could breathe for the first time in years. I didn't realize how much of my peace was being held hostage by people who expected me to always say yes. And here's the sneaky part about guilt. It makes you believe you're the bad guy just for protecting yourself. But let me tell you something. You're not cruel for saying no, you're careful. You're not selfish for choosing peace over obligation. You're smart. And honestly, it's not your job to keep family relationships alive through CPR while they refuse to even show up to the ER. Boundaries aren't walls. They're fences with gates. You decide who comes in. You decide when. And you decide if they keep getting access after they mistreat you. I've talked to dozens of people over 60 who say the same thing. I kept doing it all and nobody noticed until I stopped. The minute I started saying no, I became the villain. When I finally stopped letting them guilt me, I realized how exhausted I'd been for years. And what happens when you finally enforce a boundary? At first, there's backlash. People push harder. They call you cold, dramatic, hard to deal with. That's not a sign you're wrong. That's a sign your boundary worked. Now, a few practical truths about boundaries after 60. 1. You don't need to explain yourself. No is a complete sentence. 2. You can love someone and still limit your contact. You're not abandoning them. You're protecting yourself. 3. Time doesn't equal entitlement. Just because they've been in your life for years doesn't mean they've earned lifelong access. 4. You're allowed to change. You don't have to keep playing the same role you've always played. You're not their emotional ATM, their unpaid babysitter, or their built-in therapist. Let me ask you, who do you feel drained by every time they call? Who do you dread seeing, even if you don't say it out loud? Who takes and never checks on how you're doing? That's where the fence goes. And if they never knock on the gate again, that's not your loss. That's their choice. Since building my own boundaries, you know what I gained? Sleep, sanity. The ability to sit in my own home and not flinch when the phone rings. I no longer walk on eggshells. I no longer feel guilty for being tired. I no longer say yes to people who would never do the same for me. I thought I would lose everyone, but instead I found myself. So if you're over 60 and still struggling with the idea that setting limits makes you the bad guy, let me be your permission. You don't have to keep bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. Family might be family, but your sanity, your peace, that's yours, and it's time to protect it. Here's the thing about trust. It doesn't break with a bang. It breaks with a pattern. It starts with missed calls. Then comes the lie that didn't have to be told. Then one day you realize the person sitting across from you doesn't see you as someone to cherish, just someone to use. And when it's family, it cuts deeper, because we're taught from day one to trust them. But let me tell you something I wish someone told me at 45. And thank God I understood it at 63. You can love someone and still stop trusting them. And that doesn't make you bitter. It makes you awake. I had a cousin, Rita. She and I were like sisters growing up. I confided in her when my first marriage ended. I trusted her with things I didn't even say out loud to my own children. And one day I found out she had repeated my private business to her church group, word for word, and even added some details I never said. When I confronted her, she said, "Oh, come on, it's just talk. You're family. You know I love you." No. That's not love. That's gaslighting. Because someone who loves you protects your name in rooms you're not in. And that wasn't the first time someone close used my story as gossip. It was just the last time I tolerated it. I drew a line, and it wasn't about punishing her. It was about protecting me. And here's the most powerful part. I didn't need revenge. I needed distance. Let me tell you this, friend. If someone violates your trust more than once, it's no longer a mistake. It's a habit. And you don't have to keep handing your heart to someone who drops it every single time. Now here's the part that surprises people. After 60, you realize that trust is your most limited currency. You don't have decades to wait and see anymore. You don't have the energy to doubt every word someone says. You've earned the right to be surrounded by people who mean what they say and say what they mean. So how do you rebuild your relationship with trust itself? 1. Start with your gut. If you hesitate before sharing something with a person, ask yourself why. Chances are your instincts are more honest than their smile. 2. Give second chances, but not unlimited ones. Yes, people make mistakes. But repeated patterns are not oops moments. They're truths. 3. Watch for consistency, not charm. Charm can be manipulative. But someone who shows up for you again and again, even quietly, that's real. 4. Forgive for your peace, not to restore access. You can forgive someone and still never trust them again. That's not being cold. That's being clear. One of the hardest parts of aging is realizing that some people you once trusted were only there for the version of you that gave endlessly, not the version that finally said enough. And when you shift, some people walk away. But that's okay, because if your trust is a garden, some weeds need to be pulled, so real things can grow. Here's something I remind myself of often. You can't build a future with people who keep tearing at the foundation. And blood relation? It doesn't buy immunity from accountability. You're allowed to expect honesty. You're allowed to expect follow-through. You're allowed to say, I love you, but I don't trust you anymore. That sentence, it sets you free. I met a woman at a senior group last month named Joan, 72, bright pink glasses full of fire. She told me her son lied to her for 3 years about money he was investing for her. Turns out he was just spending it. She said, I forgave him, but I don't let him near my finances anymore. Love and trust, they're not always packaged together. And I wanted to stand up and clap, because that's it. That's the lesson right there. So if you're listening to this, and your heart feels tight because you've been betrayed by someone you were supposed to trust the most, let me say this. You're not stupid. You're not naive. You're human. But now, you're a human who sees clearly. And the beautiful thing about trust, once you know how precious it is that when someone does earn it, it feels holy. It feels rare. It feels safe. Protect that feeling. Guard it like the treasure it is. And never feel bad for cutting someone off who couldn't hold your trust with care. Because after 60, trust isn't optional. It's sacred. You want to know something no one tells you about getting older? It's that purpose. Real, honest purpose. Will carry you through things even your family can't. There comes a time when the house is quiet. When the phone doesn't ring like it used to. When holidays shrink down to a chair by the window, and traditions feel like memories wrapped in dust. And in those moments you ask yourself, what am I still here for? It's not a depressing question. It's a clarifying one. Because when the applause fades, when the kids have their own lives, when the family photos stay in the same dusty album year after year, you realize your purpose was never just to serve them. It was to become someone even you could be proud of. I know a woman named Clara, 68, who volunteers 3 times a week at a shelter. She told me, I spent 30 years cooking for people who never thanked me. Now I make soup for strangers. And they look me in the eyes and say thank you. I finally feel seen. That's purpose. And get this, her own daughter once told her, you give more to those people than you ever did for us. Clara smiled and said, that's because I'm finally giving from a place of love, not obligation. Whew, that hit me like a sermon. You see, after 60, we start peeling away all the labels. Mom, dad, wife, husband, uncle, provider, peacemaker. And what's left? You. And for many of us, that's terrifying, because we spent decades living for everyone else. But it's also the most powerful moment of your life, because for the first time, you get to ask, what do I want? What matters to me? Maybe it's painting. Maybe it's teaching others what you've learned. Maybe it's tending a garden, or writing letters to strangers, or mentoring someone who's still trying to survive what you already conquered. Purpose doesn't need applause. It just needs meaning. One man I met, Gary, 74, retired mechanic, built free wheelchair ramps for disabled veterans in his town. He told me, my kids barely talk to me, but last week, a guy I never met hugged me and cried. That felt more like family than anything I've known in years. That's what purpose does. It fills the spaces others abandoned. It doesn't ask if you're too old or too late. It just whispers, you're still here, and there's still more for you to do. Let's get even more real. Some of us had families who never saw us. Some of us poured ourselves out for decades and got crumbs in return. But the beauty of life after 60 is this. You no longer need permission to be the center of your own story. You are not just a grandparent, not just a background character in someone else's movie. You are a whole person with gifts, wisdom, fire, experience, compassion, mistakes, lessons. And you don't need your kids or your siblings or anyone else to validate that. Your purpose is not tied to who still shows up. It's tied to why you still do. I'll tell you this, from my heart. When you find your purpose, you stop needing certain people to act right. You stop waiting for apologies that won't come. You stop hoping they'll finally see your worth. Because you already know it. Because you feel it. Every time you do something that lights up your soul. So ask yourself today, what makes me feel alive, even just a little? What have I always wanted to try but told myself it was too late? Who out there might need the exact lesson I've already lived? You've got time, you've got story, and you've got strength you forgot you had. So go build that garden, start that support group, write that book, walk that dog from the shelter, teach that kid how to fish. Because here's the truth. Family may forget you, but purpose will find you again and again. And when they ask, why are you still trying? You'll answer, because I still matter, and I'm not done yet. So maybe you've been the one holding your family together with silence, sacrifice, and second chances. Maybe you've been forgotten, dismissed, taken for granted. But after everything, you're still standing. And that means something, because after 60, you realize that respect, peace, loyalty, trust, boundaries, and purpose, they're not just words, they're lifelines. You don't need a perfect family to have a powerful life. You just need clarity and the courage to choose yourself. If this story spoke to your soul, I hope you'll leave a comment, tell me your truth, and remind someone else they're not alone. Hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with me for more conversations that most people are too afraid to say out loud. Because your story matters. And the second half of life? It's yours to write, boldly, honestly, and on your own terms. See you in the next one.